it's fine. Okay. I can just cut that part out. Okay. Okay. So we know that you've been concerned with preparing your children for the math, your students for the math, and just preparing them with science so that they know the science concepts. And one of the things you've been focusing on is just questioning techniques so that they're all engaged and so that you know what students are getting the information and what students are not getting the information. So when I was in your room on Monday, what I did was I scripted what you said, the questions that you posed. You were preparing them, you were doing some math practice on testable questions. And what I did was I just, every time you posed a question, I scripted it. And then the student's response, I scripted that. And I color-coded. So the students that you called on are in red. And then responses that came from parts of the room or different students at a table that you didn't call on, I just highlighted that in green. And then unrelated questions were in aqua.
Okay.
So if you look down here, my analysis of the data I collected was, okay, so the number of questions that you posed to students during that class, that 7th hour, you posed 26 questions. And the students called on during class, and the number of times questions were directed to them is here.
Okay.
So if you notice, Terrion was 3 times. You called on, out of the 22 students, you called on 10 students. And then this gives you the number of times each student was called on. So that breaks down into 45% of the students, you had an idea whether they knew the material or not.
Okay.
And the other 55, we don't know.
Okay.
And then number of random student responses were 7, so you had other students, like Francis he wanted to answer a lot of questions, and you had Isaac, I think, answered a few, and Sergio, and I think Learic as well. So we had 7 student responses that came from random areas in the room, and I actually put that into a diagram. And then, of course, neutral and non-related. So down here gives you an idea. This is your seating chart. This is where your tables are located, and these are where students were. So this was Sergio here in the back. He was in the back. And then these are your 3 tables here. Table 4, 5, 6, and 7 here. And Francis was over here.
Oh, okay.
Up front is your desk, and you had a student there. Nyla was working the computer, and then you had a student at the lab station. So students were here, and then I tallied where the responses were coming from and where questions were posed. So you can see that even though there was 3 students here, only 1 student gave a response. 2 students here, 1 student gave a response. 4 students here, 2 students gave a response, and so forth. All right. So take a minute to digest all of that, and tell me what you think about it, and what are your impressions? What are your ideas for what you think needs to happen?
The question and answer thing, this is really interesting for me to see that I only got 45% of my kids, but I also know that in my head what kids have already, that I'm not too concerned about. And there's a small percentage that I know it. I mean, there's not going to have any issues. The ones that I do call on usually are the ones that I want to make sure they're listening, paying attention. If they're under, like Terrion, she told me at the beginning, I don't get this. So I knew to ask her. Francis, he just wants to always talk. So his response is, if I don't call on him occasionally, he will get frustrated and start doing other things. Okay, so there's a lot of dynamics going in there. For like Sergio and Brian knows it all, Sergio knows it all. I don't worry about them, but they like to participate and I have to call on them. I mean, that's just it. Des is not participating in class a lot, never. So I pull him in just to make sure he knows I'm still watching him. And try to pull him in the conversation. The Deshauna, she's another one I was concerned about,
Mhm.
seeing if she was getting it or not.
Okay.
So there's a variety of reasons why I believe that teachers do ask questions. It's just not for understanding,
Mhm.
but also to make sure that kids don't get frustrated if they're not called on. Kids that need to know that I'm watching them, kids that need to, I mean, there's that too,
Okay.
okay?
Okay. So,
And there's kids I know that are getting it.
all right, so you have an idea in your class of the students that know the material, and probably based on a lot of things that they've done or turned into
Mhm.
you, you know that they know it, and you're sure of that. And so your strategy was to call on the students that you know are struggling. And you mentioned Des not participating and doing things in class. And what I did, and I'm going to get back to the other thing in a second, but what I did with Des was I italicized that. And if you could just read it for a second and tell me, would there have been a way that you could have
Embellished on that or gone further, taken a
or
step
made
further?
sure that he answered the question?
Well, that would have been a fight. Okay, he would have taken up a lot of time to get that done. I know that sounds awful, but with Des, right now, I'm pleased of the progress he's made as far as he's sitting in a seat.
Yeah.
He's got his computer in front of him. When he told me he can't see that, I knew his computer was right there. So he could have easily read it off the computer. This was down to me in my head going, is this a battle I want to fight right now?
Okay.
Okay, so with him, I chose just to let him know, I am watching you. I'm seeing what you're doing, I'm trying to see what you're doing. And that's all I could do in the time limit. I'm down to trying to cram so much in so little time.
Oh, yeah, well, I'm in a classroom with you, so I know that.
Yeah.
Think about Des, because you say you're Des, and I understand that Des has had a lot of behavior issues, and that's something that you're really concerned with. And so your approach with him and not wanting to fight with him, I really get that. And
Under different circumstances, if we weren't under math crunch,
it would be a different story.
it would be a whole different story. That would have been down to, even the person sitting next to Esteban is not a good person to sit with him.
Mhm.
Des, at the beginning of class, at the very beginning of the year, was sitting in the corner on the floor.
Right. I
And
remember
yeah.
Des in the corner. I
Yeah,
remember him.
so for him, he is making progress.
Yes. Mhm.
Now, could I do it differently, like he's sitting there? Yeah, I could have taken the time, or should have taken the time, maybe to go back and see why he couldn't read it off his computer.
Okay. Okay, and
You know.
I'm glad you said that, because I'm just going to read this, and then is it okay if I give you some suggestions?
Sure.
Since we're crunched for
Oh,
time.
yeah.
All right, so Des, you say, can you tell me what the IV is, please? And then he didn't say anything. And so then you said, Des, I'm asking you a question. And so immediately he's like, I can't see that. So he shut down.
Mhm.
So then you let him know you were checking, and then you asked Sergio. So Sergio gave you the response. And there's a strategy from Teach Like a Champion. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Teach Like a Champion. It's called No Opt Out. And so even though Des opted out, you go back to him and make him repeat what Sergio said. So
Okay.
he's still having to say, use the language, and it's getting in his head. So he didn't just,
So he can't
He
use
passed.
not seeing as an excuse,
Right.
but what if he says, then, well, I didn't hear it?
say, Sergio, can you repeat that for me again? Repeat that so Des can repeat it after you. And then that way he has to repeat it. And it makes him focus more. And I think we can probably role play some of that before it happens.
Okay.
I should be done before 7th hour. We can role play what it might look like tomorrow
Okay.
in class. And also, if you don't mind, another suggestion. I think now, knowing the kids that, because they're taking this test, and I'm actually the test administrator, so I'm seeing the kids that are answering questions and how they're actually going about answering these questions. So there are students that do get it, and I'm seeing that. But for the students that you're concerned with and the ones that you called on, there are other strategies that you can use. So example, like turn and talk. So before, like as you pose a question, so say here, you read the question, and then you say, talk to your partner about what were they changing, turn and talk to your partner, 15 seconds, turn and talk. And then they have to talk about what was happening, so they have to talk to each other about what they think it was, then you can call on Sergio. Because you want to make sure that he gets it. You know what the other ones do, but you want to make sure that he gets it. And so I have a paper that lists some of those type of strategies, that are engagement strategies, and also talks about no opt-out that you can use where you're still accomplishing your goal, which is we want to focus on the kids that are really struggling and know that they're not getting it, but while also making sure the other one, reinforcing it with the other ones as well.
Okay.
So they have to talk, and then you can still call on those individuals, you can still cold call those individual students so you can get the feedback that you need.
Okay.
Okay, and so we'll talk about that maybe after 7th hour.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.